In the deepest depths of Stirling University lies a man who ponders important questions. Not questions like, what's the meaning of life, or why are we here? But questions that center over one concept. How do I scare my audience? Tonight, he will answer that question, reading tales that are so utterly horrifying they may leave you weak at the knees. Welcome to the Spook Zone.
I must say, I must say that there are people that are a bit towards Lovecraft for the very reason that his descriptions of things, they often repeat themselves a lot. Like let me see if I can find a specific phrase that really, pushed it. Where are you? The phrase repeated itself so many times. Yeah, it was the three cities that were constantly repeated. Thra, Ilanek, and Kedathron. That phrase pops up a lot. Now, in writing, repeating something can be good and it can emphasize things, but there are some things that you shouldn't do. And another thing that a lot of people are a bit towards Lovecraft about is his interesting thoughts on race. He was not a particularly wide-minded individual, and he was, in fact, a bit of a racist. And in some of his works, you can actually kind of see hintings of that. I think, where's the phrase? The brave and adventurous young men of yellow hair and blue eyes. I think you're talking about you're not the only guy that thought that, my friend, but the other guy that thought that he caused a war. He was bad. So yeah, Lovecraft wasn't exactly very good with his ability to see that people are equal and not one person is born greater than the other. But the trick with it is you've just got to unfortunately get over it in terms of his work. You can criticize the person all you want. That's perfectly fine. But in terms of writing and what the actual work that they produce, unless it becomes an actual detriment, you just got to keep going with it. Because as much as Lovecraft is inherently flawed as a human being, he did create some really good stories, and there's a reason that his mythology and the sort of horrible eldritch abominations are still so popular, because they're good. They're well written and they're very, very spooky. But you can't have everything, and in this case, we have horrible, horrible horror stuff and racism. That's good. So, on a lighter note, let's move on to the internet. Did I say lighter note? I meant not lighter note, because the internet is horrifying. Yeah, love me some horrifying internet stories. But before that, I need to calm my throat, because that was a long read, and I'm going to calm my throat through the magical powers of Oreos. Not sponsored, but if you buy them, and Oreos are pretty good, I think. A lot of people dislike Oreos themselves, but you know what? They're cowards. They don't understand the might that is the Oreo. And they also don't understand how it is to live with type 2 diabetes, but that's fine. Don't even want to worry about that. Tastes divine. Just realized I forgot to record my show. Whoops. Oh well, I'll record it now, I think, and hopefully people won't get too cross. Yeah, I'm just gonna click the record button. Hopefully nobody will notice. I was recording the whole time. Don't worry about it. Oh, right, there we go. Record button is clicked, and now we can get the second half of the show, which I now remember to actually record. Oh well, that's fine. It's fine. You only missed, to be honest, that story could have been better. The amount of description, it was constantly repeated. Yeah, could be better. Could be more interesting. However, you can't have all good stories, and certainly that is the case with Lovecraft. He had some misses, as we know. So, anybody that just tuned in now or is listening on my YouTube channel, yeah, I forgot to record the first part. So you're getting the second part, which is the internet stuff, which arguably is kind of better because, thankfully, with the internet, there is a level of, with Lovecraft, you either get, long expository sort of bits of things about a place that doesn't exist, or you get the good stuff, which is, the telling of a guy's adventure, which is usually what you would get on the internet. Usually, expository bits of dialogue about a thing that doesn't that's just imaginary, isn't quite as common online and in stories written in contemporary stuffs. Though I might be wrong, and I might just be talking out of my butt because I at least haven't read much of that sort of work from people. However, we are not going to be doing more Lovecraft and more expository stuff. We're going to be focusing on, as I say, some stories from specific perspectives. One of which is from a fellow who has a friend who's, what he does in his spare time is make lost episodes. So, if you're familiar with any sort of internet sort of culture in terms of this is the secret last episode of this story, or it's the unreleased special feature, it's George Lucas's latest masterpiece that he didn't release because he wanted to make not money. Anyway, lost episodes are a thing basically, and this guy is friends with someone who makes fake ones, makes sort of bastardized versions of cartoons and puts them in little shops that are unsuspecting, so that random people might pick them up, put them in, and then be surprised to find out that it's not actually what they bought. So, with this in mind and our context framed, we are going to get into the meat of it. This next story is Lost Episodes by Slime Beast, and Slime Beast, incidentally, is a great writer. A lot of my favorite stories derive from him. So, oh, pardon me. If you're online and you want to have a look at some good spooky stories that are just free to look at on the internet, Slime Beast's your guy. Particularly if you're looking for stuff that's it's not too short or not too long. It's just the right amount of time is spent writing on this. These are perfect length sort of stories for getting into it. And as my last Oreo gets devoured, delicious. We shall get into this story. This is Lost Episodes by Slime Beast. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble here, so if you believe in, haunted Lost Episode legends and enjoy living in that world, then maybe this post isn't for you. No, don't get me wrong. I hate it when people complain about lack of realism in entertainment. I think all kids need to believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy as long as possible, but this is different. Back in the 80s, I met this dude, Sid, who would... he used to cut old VHS tapes and stuff like that. It was more than a hobby for him. It was pretty much his entire life. His parents were a bit more wealthy than I'd been blessed with, so when we were teenagers and I was slaving away at a Scats fast food restaurant, he just hung out around the house, cutting these tapes all day, all night. Of course, as you get older, things in your past become a bit clearer, and I think he might have been borderline autistic. Or maybe he was just a very high-functioning person with Asperger's, but of course, I'm no expert. And I'm not saying that was the case. It's just the best and quickest way I can think of to explain his personality and his obsession with cutting tapes and cutting tapes and cutting tapes, and that... It all started when he saw old Yeller as a little kid. For whatever reason, his parents let him watch that shit. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's the tale of a boy and his dog. I hope I don't have to announce the spoiler on such an old-ass movie, but in the end, the boy has to shoot his own dog because it's rabid. No. Sid didn't appreciate this. His dad had photographed and videotaped weddings, so he showed Sid how to operate some of the machines. And Sid cut out the ending, replacing it with an earlier, happier scene, as if old Yeller suddenly got better off screen. He watched the tape obsessively after that, even into his early teens. When I first met him, he made me watch it once to show how he fixed it. And I could actually picture him as a little boy, once he started applauding and cheering his own faux ending. I didn't want to say I'm a bad influence, but after I saw it, I asked if he could do that with other movies. My major interest was perhaps taking a film or two and cutting in some nude frames the actresses hadn't really done. Don't worry though, I never had the guts to actually ask if he would. I just imagined how cool it would be. Often. Sid told me, yes, he could fix any movie he wanted. In fact, he had done it with a few others. He had a copy of Ghostbusters cartoon, and I shit you not, every ghost was completely removed. Now, the story made no sense, there was no continuity, but he'd accomplished it, and I was very impressed. I guess in the time of VHS, these things seemed more magical than they do nowadays. So as time went by, I encouraged Sid to edit more movies, but with different purposes. Instead of whitewashing all the scary stuff like he'd wanted to do, I got him to see the light on how awesome he could make things. Now, somewhere out there, this chubby Star Wars nerd from our high school has all 3 original films flawlessly cut together with editing and effects. That would have made George Lucas himself cry out, "Enough meddling!" And we charged him like $20 for the only copy because we're idiots. Anyway, this went on for a while before I lost my interest in it. It was more of a goof for me than it was for him, and at this point this is the point where I start working, I start driving, and I start taking paces with local girls. Well, he just got more and more involved with cutting the tapes. I think his favorites were cartoons. When The Simpsons came around, he went apeshit at those. Now, his edits weren't so much fixing things as breaking them in an interesting way. Another thing that sticks out in my mind is when he recorded an episode of MASH and he cut it with a gory old war flick. Halfway through this version, the camp gets bombed, the soldiers invade, everyone dies. At the end, he specifically worked in freeze frames of each cast member's face, eyes closed. He had completely reversed his interests and embraced what had once terrified him. Scary endings. He seemed to love things like long, drawn-out sequences and terrifying silence. He'd make me quiet while they played, too. Okay, you may have heard of this mysterious fellow named Banksy who goes around creating interesting graffiti and whatnot. At one point, he went into a music store and replaced some Paris Hilton CDs with his own fakes. No, Banksy? He had nothing on Sid. Every other week, he'd tell me about some store or video rental place he'd snuck some of his tapes into. He swapped out the real ones for his versions. And then he'd start all over by cutting the ones he'd stolen. At one point, when I hadn't heard from him for a long while, I stopped by his parents' house and found him in the garage. He'd set up his own little movie studio there, complete with a drawing board. Now, all at once, I was both blown away by his artistic skill I'd never seen before, because he was actually animating entirely new content. But I was very concerned about when this guy was going to come out of the dark and start acting like normal, like me. He barely looked up from his drawings as we spoke, and I asked him what any kid now in his late teens would ask. What the fuck is wrong with you? Seriously, dude, this is some crazy shit. It's work. I'm working. My work is just as important as everybody else's. Are you even selling these anymore, or are you just sneaking them into places? How much is this costing your dad? I don't care. I looked at what he was so fervently illustrating. Is that a headless body? Dancing? Yeah? That's pretty dark, man. I know. That's the point. I don't get it. Those tapes. I thought they were wrong, but over time I figured out the truth. Which is... the scary stuff is right. The happy endings are the lie. He just kept drawing as I stood there. The silence was disturbing. And at that moment I could smell the body odor coming off of him, and it wasn't just sweat either. It was a mingling of that and a foul stench of something else, something far worse. I hate to say it, but I gave up on him right then. It's the moment when you look at someone you thought you knew, and all you can think is, holy Christ, I never realized they were this far gone. It wasn't until my 30s that Sid crossed my mind again. I was perusing the internet, just aimlessly wandering the web, when I came across a series of urban legends about strange VHS tapes, recut movies, and lost episodes, and some of these I'd recognized. I'd watched them with Sid. Or I'd actually seen him in the middle of working on them. Every disturbing scene, every unbelievable anecdote, I believed it because I'd been there. Others, like SpongeBob cartoons or episodes of iCarly or whatever, those shows came along after I'd made my break with Sid, but the style was all too familiar. Even the ones that didn't sound like his work seemed like they could have been broken copies or attempts at mimicking his work. He was still doing it. My God, it boggled my mind. I called Sid's old number, not entirely sure I'd find him there, and it rang for minutes on end. And I knew that the search was hopeless. Even if he lived with his parents, it wasn't likely they'd still all be at the same house by now. Still, I made it a point to drive to his old place, to see if he was still in that garage, cutting tapes or manipulating them via computer, whatever he would be up to. When I passed the house, the unkept lawn was overgrown with huge, waist-high weeds, the dilapidated facade of the building with its peeling paint on the shutters, missing roof tiles and muck-filled gutters. That told me no one had lived there for a long time. I saw a note on the door, but couldn't read it from the road. Maybe it was something I could use to locate Sid and see if he'd ever gotten the help I realized I should have given him. Pulling into the driveway, my headlights illuminated the garage door. It was windowless and vandalized with the gangster tags of some traveling band of assholes. And the note on the door, as one might expect, spoke of a certain bank now owning the property. It noted that trespassing was heavily discouraged, and that at a certain point, someone would be out to make sure the house was winterized, or whatever the hell that is. As I walked back to the car, defeated, something was nagging at me. I knew that Sid's parents kept a spare key under a false rock at the back stairs. Basically, by virtue of Sid locking us both out on several occasions, and when I found the key, a sense of cold, gnawing dread swelled in my stomach. Who would move out and leave everything in a place like this? The key was the most obvious thing, but flower pots and lawn decorations were still there. Sid's old, rusted-out Huffy bike was leaning against the house and had created thick, rusty streaks along the aluminum sliding. I don't know what I expected to find, but using the key, I entered the house. The smell was overwhelming. Not a putrid smell, nothing rotten or decaying, just the smell of... I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you, but the smell of, like, electricity. like burning dust on a light bulb or a heater giving off a particular warmed metal odour. That was my least of my concerns, however, as I saw everything just as I'd left it. Everything Sid's family owned was frozen in time. The dining room table we'd all sat at on many occasions was dust-covered and supported an emaciated dead rat, which had all but turned to dust. The television, that bulky, oversized television set we'd all sat around and watched Sid's tapes on, and Lord, his creativity, it sat where it always had been, silently displaying a violent bombardment of black and white static. As I moved from the rooms, the sense of panic and discomfort within me only grew. Every fibre in my being was shouting, "Run! Run, you fucking idiot!" Still, I pressed on into Sid's bedroom. It was now empty and in disrepair. His prized action figures and blank videotapes, hundreds of videotapes, were stale and water-damaged. I almost wanted to call out, to shout, "Sid!" and wait for him to appear as if nothing were out of the ordinary. I went into his parents' bedroom. There, lying in bed, were two motionless bodies. Gaunt, grey, half turned to dust. Just like the rat in the dining room. I could scarcely believe what I was seeing with my own eyes. Not only were the two dead bodies slowly dissipating within the confines of this one idyllic suburban household, but no one had even checked on them. Nobody discovered this until now. My mind raced. My heart raced. The only things that wouldn't move were my feet, which remained glued to the spot. Sid, I thought, must have done this. There was no way the two of them would just lie down one night and simultaneously die of natural causes. Sid had said he didn't care about his parents, and when was the last time I'd even seen them? God, I hadn't seen them for days, maybe weeks, before the last time I talked to Sid. When I finally left the room, I took out my cell phone and began dialing 911. However, as soon as I lifted it to my head, an ear-splitting shriek of interference nearly caused me to fling the object across the room. I rushed to the kitchen phone. Squealing static. I tried the living room phone just to be thorough. Static. It wasn't until I put the receiver back down that I heard it. Music. Faint. Barely audible music that I hadn't noticed before. It seemed to be some repeating melody, happy and light. Some flutes. Maybe a whole horn section. I followed the peppy tune to the indoor house of the garage, pressing my ear to the door's dirty surface. I determined that the music was indeed coming from base just beyond. "Sid!" I called out, barely managing to form the name with cold, bloodless lips. "Sid! Are you in there? Are you all right?" I tried the door, only to find it somehow locked from the other side. It was no matter, since one wild kick nearly knocked the rotting wood off its hinges. "Sid!" I shouted as the dust slowly cleared. Through the haze, I could only see the light of a television screen. Vibrant colors. Blue, green, yellow. Soon I could make out a cartoon playing on the screen. Then the silver wires running from the set itself to some dark mass. Then the dark mass took a shape as my eyes adjusted to the odd lighting. It was Sid, or rather his body, not dead nearly as long as his parents, seated in an old office chair. The wires from the television set led directly to his body, eventually disappearing into several old, crusted-over holes in his leathery flesh. Through a small worm-eaten opening in his ribs, I thought I could see more metal inside of him. I walked over to Sid's side, holding my hand over my mouth in fear of vomiting. My God, his face was twisted into a hideous, wide grin. His empty eye sockets almost seemed happy, hooded by a pleased brow line. "Hi there!" I heard a jarring voice. The voice was upbeat, high-pitched. It sounded almost like Sid, but different. Bubbly, cartoony. I turned to the screen. The green grass, the blue sky, the yellow flowers, and Sid. A perfect caricature of him. It strolled along the infinite loop of that utopian cartoon background. It waved to me. "Sid," I whispered. "Oh God, Sid!" The cartoon version of him, turned his attention away from me and continued to merrily stroll across that unending cycle of the same backdrop. He passed a shrub, then passed it again and again. The same bluebird, chirping happily, flew through the sky in a figure eight. "Sid!" I shook my head, unable to comprehend the scenario. I should have never let you leave reality. I thought about what Sid had done to his mum and dad. I thought about how the bank would come by soon, and this would all come to light. And I watched Sid walk along for nearly half an hour. Then I unplugged the set. Well, that was bad. And by bad, I mean bad on my brain because it spooked me too hard. I shouldn't have used the word bad to describe that immediately. That was foolish of me. It's great. I like that story a lot. Not only because it's one of the stories I first read, but also because I like how the picture of paints it, the sort of the person that is like in the story itself is well presented as well. The person you're following, he seems human. And it's good to get a human element in your stories, because one of the good ways of making a reader connect with what they're reading is by making it sort of realistic and human. And, it's especially useful for scary stories, because you'll get scared way easier if you're connected into the story and invested than not. Now, we've got like 10 minutes, so I don't think I'll be able to do this other story I had planned, which is like probably going to be as long as that one, so that'll be like another 20. But I do know another one which is pretty good, and is not as big. In fact, it's not big at all, but it's still one really good. It's fantastic, and it's such a twist as well. I shouldn't have said that. Damn it! God, I screwed it up. Never mind. Just don't worry about that. Before I begin, I'm just going to have my pre-story Oreo TM sponsor me, please. Tastes like sadness. And the pleading of a sponsorship. So, let's get into this. This is one of my other favorite stories. This is Lightning by Alapan Amo. Alapan Amo? Alapan Amo. Yeah. Alapan Amo. Here we go. Let's get this out of the way. Let's get this party started. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know what I'm saying. No, you don't. Probably sound like a complete insane person. We had just moved into a little ranch house in the suburbs. Storybook neighborhood. Quiet, friendly neighbors, picket fences, the whole 9 yards. Suffice it to say that this was supposed to be a new start for me. A recently single dad and my 3-year-old son. A time to move on from the previous year's drama and stress. I viewed the thunderstorm as a metaphor for this fresh start. One last show of theatrics before the dirt and grime of the past would be washed away. My son loved it anyway, even with the power out. It was the first big storm he'd ever seen. Flashes of lightning flooded the bare rooms of our house, imparting unpacked boxes with long, creeping shadows. And he jumped and squealed as the thunder boomed. It was well past his bedtime before he'd finally settled down enough to go to sleep. The next morning I found him awake, in bed, smiling, and saying, "I watched the lightning at my window," he proudly announced. A few mornings later he told me the same thing. "You're silly," I said. "You didn't storm last night, you were only dreaming." "Oh." He seemed somewhat disheartened. I ruffled his hair and told him not to worry, there should be another storm soon. And then it became a pattern. He would tell me how he watched the lightning outside his window at least twice a week, despite there being no storms. Recurring dreams of that first memorable thunderstorm, I figured. It's easy to hate myself in hindsight. Everybody assures me that there's nothing I could have done, no way I could have known, but I'm supposed to be the guardian of my child, and these are useless words of comfort. I constantly relive that morning, making my coffee, pouring milk over my cereal, and picking up the newspaper to read about the pedophile local authorities had just arrested. It was front-page stuff. Apparently, this guy would select a young target, usually a boy, stake out the house for a while, and take flash photos of them through their window while they slept. Sometimes he did more. My stomach sank as the connection was made. At the time, it was merely something from a child's imagination. In retrospect, it's the scariest thing I've ever heard. About a week before the predator was caught, my son came up to me in his pajamas. "Guess what?" he asked. "What?" "No more lightning in my window." I played along. "Ah, that's nice. Finally died down, huh?" "No. Now it's in my closet." I've yet to see the photos police have collected. That's that hurts to read sometimes because it's just so grim. But hey, if you can't take your grim stories, then you know what? Don't. Oreos, you have saved my life, despite the fact that I forgot to record the first half of this show. You weren't missing much if you were just tuning in, like on the halfway point. You're fine. I think for next week I'll make sure that I pick a better story in terms of Lovecraftian stuff. I might start one of the proper big ones that would probably take a few sessions to read. And that'll be fun, because that means we've got a sort of thing to look forward to each week, like a new bit of the story to look forward to going like, whoa, I can't wait to see what happens next. They die. They all die. That's what happens next. You idiot. Oh, colds and flu and blah. Right. So that was the show, basically. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you enjoyed and didn't mind me messing up, as I do. It's been a fun ride. And it's a pleasure to do this for you. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you to Oreos trademark for not sponsoring me. You can fix that if you sponsor me. You know, little wink to the camera that I don't have. Wink, wink. You know what I'm saying? Yay! Sponsor me. And everybody else, have a good night. Stay spooked.